So Jordan Peterson thinks he has found this gotcha point. He has said it in multiple different videos, and it seems he really needs an answer to this question.
On the moderate left, I mean, I've studied totalitarianism for a very long time, both on the left and on the right in various forms, and I think we've done a pretty decent job of determining when right-wing beliefs become dangerous. I think that they become dangerous when the people who stand on the right evoke notions of racial superiority or ethnic superiority, something like that. It's fairly easy to draw a box around them and place them to one side, and necessary, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that. What I fail to see happening on the left, and this is with regards to the sensible left, because such a thing exists, is for the same thing to happen with regards to the radical leftists. Okay, so here's an open question. If it's not diversity, inclusivity, and equity as a triumvirate that mark out the too excessive left, and with equity defined, by the way, not as equality of opportunity, which is an absolutely laudable goal, but as equality of outcome, which is how it's defined, then exactly how do we demarcate the too extreme left? What do? We say, well, there's no such thing as the too extreme left. If we can agree, and we haven't, that the left can go too far, which it clearly can, then how would my worthy opponents precisely define when the left that they stand for has gone too far?
I don't know why this has to be said or answered, but I guess I have to take a crack at it so that maybe he will shut up. Now, trying to identify what is the left versus right is kind of complicated, and their definitions are varied. So I have to define what they are, or as Peterson says,
well, the first answer would be, it depends on what you mean by Jesus.
I don't know what the person means by believe or God, and they think they know. And the probability that they construe belief and construe God the same way I do is virtually zero.
Trying to define what right-wing is depends on how you view the political spectrum and your understanding of political ideologies versus parties. Right versus left falls into a broader sense of political ideologies. It's a group generalization. Funny how Peterson hates to use groups, but then wants an answer that addresses an entire group. Try doing a Google search on what is the right or left, and very few articles try to define the terms. Wikipedia has taken a crack at it, but it isn't this concrete idea. We normally associate certain ideologies as being right-wing. Conservatism, fascism, neoliberalism, Nazism, and libertarian, to name a few. I think what I'll do is try to define right-wing by looking at what is common between all the right-wing ideologies. I think the most basic way to describe right-wing politics is that it revolves around the idea of individualism and traditionalism. It relies heavily on concepts such as hierarchies and natural law to justify how society is structured. Many people refer to the right wing as reactionary because it wants to either return to the way things were or more often start as a reaction against left-wing ideas which are spreading in a country. Marry all that with a small government framework, and I think this gives us a pretty good idea of what the right wing is. So how does one define what is too far on the right? Well, Peterson defines it as racial superiority.
On the right, I think we've identified markers for people who've gone too far in their ideological presuppositions. And it looks to me like the marker we've identified is racial superiority.
But when you look at the commonalities of right-wing ideology above, where does race even show up? I think what he means is that the extreme is when we take natural law to such an extreme that produces a hierarchy based upon that, which is weird because he's okay with gender superiority through natural law, but whatever. So if we take the idea of one race being naturally superior and then give them a hierarchy where it's on top, then that's the marker of what is too extreme. That is the farthest to the right that you can go. I still don't understand why that is a unique problem of right-wing ideologies, but okay. It has nothing to do with the overarching theme that the right is usually just about individualism. I think he uses this as a straw man to not actually define what right extremism is because we've already defeated it in the past. Since it is no longer a threat, he doesn't have to actually engage in the conversation. Nazis are the extreme. Since Nazis don't exist anymore, let's move on. Maybe Peterson is alluding to an extreme form of traditionalism in which white people dominated the hierarchies, and this is what they would like to return to. Many religions also have this ideology rooted in their teachings. Mormons, for the longest time, used to teach that dark-skinned people were the neutrals in the war against Jesus and Lucifer. The dark skin was a curse. But if this is the case, why wouldn't Jordan also be against men being at the top of hierarchies as well?
Men have no idea how to treat women if they're in male power hierarchies. They have no idea how to treat them. And that's because we have no idea how to do that. No one has any idea how to do that. It's only been happening in any, pronounced sense for about, well, on a societal level, really probably since the mid-70s. It's 3 generations. It's a drop in the bucket.
Yes, I must also try to give a marker in which it is too far on the right, since Peterson has no idea what he's talking about. I think the marker for what is too far on the right is when the individual is placed above all else. When the individual becomes a sort of god in its own way, where one doesn't care about how their actions affect those around them. They have to become the center of the universe, and everything that doesn't primarily involve improving their lot is secondary. They have no regard to the collective and actively fight against it in all forms. They derive their identity from their own personal narrative and do not give credit to anything else. Now, to move on to what is the left. The left generally supports everything the right does not. Funny how it's almost a black and white type fallacy. The left generally supports social equality and egalitarianism, often in opposition to social hierarchy. It typically involves a concern for those in society whom its adherents perceive as disadvantaged relative to others, as well as a belief that there are unjustified inequalities that need to be reduced or abolished. If the right is about traditionalism and individualism, then it's only fair to say that the left is about progressivism and communitarianism. Do not get that confused with communism. Communism is a governmental structure. Communitarianism talks about the relationship of the individual within the broader community it resides in. This is how the individual sees itself, as a part of a community and not as an extreme individual. Generally speaking, the left likes a big government in order to help enforce many of its egalitarian views. It uses the power of the government, which equates the collective will of its citizens, to create and enact policies to produce a community which leads to a more equitable distribution of resources and capital. It generally always progresses towards social justice in the hopes of creating equal outcomes and opportunities when outcomes cannot be controlled. The left likes to use the power of the state or the collective. So I believe that if we're going to draw a line at what is too far on the left, I think the line would be complete and utter control to the collective with no regard of the individual. Governmentally, this would be something akin to totalitarianism, the state having complete control over every aspect of the individual's life. All forms of communication are monitored and heavily regulated. Free speech becomes non-existent. And I actually mean free speech, not the speech Dave Rubin advocates for, but the no interference from the government free speech. Individuals only exist in order to feed the collective. They have no other freedom than what is necessary for the collective to survive. This is what I would call the marker for what is too far on the left. A society in which the sense of the individual dies. That a religion has been built around the collective to such a degree that any dissent is considered an act of treason and punishable by death. The collective extracts all the resources and leaves the individuals in a constant state of poverty and inhumane conditions. How I do not make any reference towards the terms liberal or conservative. These terms exist on a separate field that cause the spectrum to have 4 areas. They move either upwards or below. This is why you can have right and left authoritarians or right and left libertarians. The political landscape is incredibly complex, as I've said before. It's not something you can just pull up in a dictionary to understand. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Texas of Austin in government, where I specialized in political theory. I'm not saying this to complain I have authority, but to point out that I'm not new to the study of politics. Here is where I lie on the political compass scale. I advocate for a healthy blend between the individual and the collective. We should allow individuals to think and speak freely in order to advance our own understanding of the world. We should allow them to develop their own talents and desires. We want innovative people to help advance our society, but we don't need these individuals to become so individual that they can't see how the community has helped them develop, where they feel that they are only successful from their own decisions while the entire world operates around them. It's this idea that the Abrahamic religions have a problem with. Why would God spend so much time worried about this little speck in the universe? In the bigger picture, there is an entire universe that also exists. We should allow the collective to create an environment that allows individuals to thrive and be protected from other individuals. The collective should also aim towards looking at the long-term goal of the human race and how to make sure it continues to exist. However, it can't stifle the individual so much that the individual cannot grow and innovate. It needs to have the ability to dissent from the collective in order to promote different ideas that will eventually be adopted or rejected. The political landscape has been too polarized around these two main concepts. No, the individual should reign supreme. No, the government needs to be superior. No, it's a blend between the two, and that is where we should focus our energy. So, to Jordan Peterson, I have defined what is both too far right and too far left under the ambiguous ideas of left and right. Hopefully, now you can stop asking this question and we can move on to something else.